thank you for coming along. There's many sessions that you could be going into now, but you've chosen to come here, so I am very grateful for that. It's great to see so many of you here. We're going to be going through selections in Photoshop. Did you all get that email that I sent out originally to say, what do you want me to do? Okay, cool. It was really interesting, the results or the emails I got back from that. Most people saying, hair. Can you show us how to cut out hair? And it's you know, you're not alone, believe me, because I think everybody struggles cutting out hair. But have you noticed, and I know we can say this is just between us now, right? Nobody else, this is just between us. There's nobody from Adobe in here, I don't think. All right, so we're clear. Have you noticed when you get to see selections being done, demonstrations, how they're always on a very simple background? Have you noticed that? It's like, here's how we can cut out somebody with dark hair off a white background. Wow, really? We could do that years ago. We don't need new stuff to do that, all right? Now, let's be honest. I mean, somebody said to me on one of the emails, they said, could you show us how to cut out somebody who has dark hair off a dark background? Let me just tell you this now. Adobe will be able to show us how to turn water into wine before that ever happens. All right? We cannot do that. But I want to show you some workarounds. All right? I think when it comes to selections, we can get a little bit hung up on getting it perfect, on getting all those little fine hairs. But does it really matter? Does it really matter if we get every single fine hair? If you're working for a client and they're really happy with what you've done, I mean, I've never had a client go to me, I love it, but is there every hair there? They've never done that. They're just really happy with the cutout. So I want to kind of show you some tricks as well, but also I want to kind of encourage you just to relax. Don't get so stressed about your cutouts, all right? But also, don't rush your cutouts. Take your time. What I'm going to go through now, when you can watch the video later, think of it as 800 times slower. Just take your time, all right? Take your time. But before we crack on, you'll have seen this slide already, I'm sure, during, presentations. If you could fill that in positively, it would be nice. But if you could fill that in, that would be great. Because I get to come over from the UK because of you folks. This is very much your function. Places that I sometimes will present at, it's down to the people who are running the presentation as to who comes along. But what if they don't resonate with you? What if you don't like the way they talk or the way they show things? You're stuck with it. But with this, you get to decide who comes along. If we get a good score, there's every chance. If not, then fair enough. But it's what you want. And you're paying good money to be here, right? So there you go. So if you can fill that in, that'd be great. The other thing to let you know about is this slide here. We could sit here and go through loads of stuff. But the saying, I remember years ago hearing a saying, to know and not to do is not to know. If you don't practice this stuff, forget it. You're not going to learn it. So that URL there, you can download the assets that I'm going to use now in this. You'll be able to watch the video on Adobe later. And I'll also more than likely send you out individual videos for those sections, because we may not get through everything. So there might be some extras I want to share with you. And I'll be upfront and honest. When you go there, I'll ask you for your name and email address. You'll be part of the email community. If you don't want to be, unsubscribe. Just get your assets, okay? Is that fair? Cool, all right. So let us crack on. How's the audio? Because I used to go to drama school, so I'm really talking loud now, and I'm hoping that benefits. But let's have a look. All right, so the first thing I'm going to open up is a real simple file here. And this is my friend Dave. Whoops. Now, why isn't that showing on the screen? Tony? All right, so what you can see now okay, is my friend Dave. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some real simple stuff because at first, I don't know the level of people in here. Beginners, intermediate. I mean, what's intermediate? Beginners, intermediate, advanced. Who knows? But just so I know, who here is not a graphic designer, photographer? Who does this for money? Oh, you got to drag it across. All right. Who here does this for money? Wow. Okay, so that's quite a lot. So who here does it just because they love doing it? That should be all of you, shouldn't it? You should all have your hands up. You should all be enjoying it. Right, get my technical man. Is that showing now? Yeah, there you go. Brilliant. Thank you. Round of applause, Tony. Thank you very much, Tony. All right, okay, so now selections. Whether you're a graphic designer, an illustrator, or a photographer, I think selections are vital because we need to isolate areas. We might need to cut things out. We might need to replace things. So selections are vital, okay? So for example, and we're going to start simple and build up, all right? So when I first started, I remember about 11, 12 years ago, I would, let's just get that down. I would buy magazines that would teach me how to do selections in Photoshop, how to make somebody's teeth look better. All right, that's what they would show me. So they would spend about 20 minutes showing me how to use something like the pen tool to select the teeth, and then I'd show me how to make the teeth look better. And that's like 20 minutes. I'm like, I've got to do the rest of the picture yet. How can I do it quicker? Well, thinking of the basics of selections, all we're going to do is tell Photoshop, look at this. Ignore everything else, just look at this. So for example, for the teeth, I'm not going to use the pen tool. All I'm going to do is just get my lasso tool and I'm going to do this. Those aren't his real teeth, by the way. They are false teeth, just so you know. That's what Dave's told me to say. So now, with that, we've got the selection active. Photoshop is only looking within that area, right? So how can I now just very quickly help his teeth to look better? I'll just get what is considered a really basic adjustment, hue and saturation, and I'll go to the yellows, and then I'll just brighten them. Simple. All right, so there's before, and there's after. So Photoshop is only looking in that area. What is yellow? I'll brighten it. That is a real simple, effective way of making selections and using selections, right? Real simple. Saves you loads and loads of time. So moving on from that, one of the things I was asked about was to do with making selections based on color. Lots of different ways we can make selections. And actually, that's one of the things I want to mention. There are so many tools within Photoshop, loads of tools. They're always making things more enhanced, and there's always the basics that we've always known. Just think that there's not one tool for everything. If there's we want to select color, we have color range. That doesn't necessarily mean that is the tool for the job. So always kind of think of Photoshop as a tool bag. Learn lots of techniques that you can put in there, because if that technique doesn't work, you can bring out another and try that. Does that make sense? Cool. So, for example, if I wanted to change the color of this top here, I could go to color range. So go select and color range. And in here, for those of you who don't know, we can actually choose the color we want to select by using that little point sample there to click down. And in that dialog box over here, anywhere that's white is what we're selecting, all right? So if I wanted to select his jumper, I could actually say over here, we've got this little plus icon on the color sampler. I click that down, and I'll click and drag over the jumper. Now there are parts missing. So I need to tell Photoshop, do me a favor, give me some more color. And that's what the Fuzziness Slider, I don't know why they call it fuzziness. Maybe range would have been better, I don't know. But we'll say fuzziness is the one we need to use. And if I now drag that over to the right-hand side, you'll see that it starts to bring in more color. So it's allowing me to select more. But if I want to get all the jumper and I bring it across, I'm starting to bring in the head. And I don't want that. So maybe color range isn't the right one for me. All right? So what else could I do? I could turn to a really basic thing in Photoshop. Something that intermediates would go, I wouldn't dream of using that. That's really basic. But it's how you use these things that can really help us. So I'm going to go back to hue and saturation. And then what I'm going to do here is, so you've got these two bars at the bottom. And again, this is for those of you who don't know yet. We're going to build up. But we've got two bars at the bottom. Two coloured bars. Think of those as the colour wheel. And it's been stretched out. The top one and the bottom one. Okay, there's two there. Now what you'll notice is, when I move the hue, or the colour if you like, look what happens. The bottom one moves. So the top one is fixed. The bottom one, when I move the hue, is telling you, right, this colour on top, if you move the hue, the one below is what it will become. All right? Nice and simple. Really, really useful. So how can I now use that? Well, let's just bring that back to 0 there. I'm going to go to the Masters menu here, and I'm going to choose Magentas. Now, I don't know if that's going to be the right colour for the jumper, so what I can do to select the colour is get these 4 sliders here, these little markers. We've got 2 in the middle and 2 on the outside. The 2 on the middle, if you look at those and look directly above them, Photoshop is saying, this is the colour I'm giving you. This is your colour. The 2 outer ones is where Photoshop is being kind and saying, I'll also give you a bit of this. All right? So, how can we now know, how do I know that's still correct? I don't. So what I'm going to do is get one of the outer markers and bunch them all together. Doesn't matter where they go, but they're all bunched together. Now, if I get my colour sampler, little one in the middle here with the plus icon, and I click and drag on the jumper, can you see now how they've gone apart? So Photoshop is saying, right, where you click down and moved around, this is the colours you need. All right? So now when I use the hue, we can go like this. Now it's moving a bit of the head there. I don't know why it's doing that. Let's bring that across just a touch. We've got red in the skin, haven't we? There we go. So now we can do that. We can see that the jumper's changing colour. But the great thing here is we've got a layer mask. We can get a brush with a black colour and just very quickly take it off the face. Very quick. So now I can just come in and change the colour of the jumper. All right? No selections being made, none of that tricky kind of stuff. So now let's take it another level. I hate that. You hear that all the time, don't you? Another level, game changer and all that. But let's just take it to another level. All right? And let's have a look at this. Let's open this picture here. We've got red skin. Now, this is a picture from I'm doing a World War II project. And this is Chris. His dad was a dispatch rider during World War II. And I'm doing this kind of project where I'm photographing all people from the war and people who were children during the war. And I'm really, really loving it. Projects I absolutely love. But when I did this picture of Chris, he wasn't that happy about it because of this skin condition he's got. He's got red patches on his face. And if I zoom in, you'll see what I mean. See all this redness here? So I'm thinking, right, well, how can I get rid of this fairly easily? What can I do? I'm going to have to select it somehow. Out of all the ways I could, I've got to choose a way that's going to work best for me. And we don't have to overcomplicate things. Let's keep it simple, all right? I'm going to go back to using hue and saturation. I'm not going to make any particular selection here. But what I'm going to do is this. I am going to choose hue and saturation. And from the masters here, I am going to choose reds. And again, we get those 2 markers in the middle, above which Photoshop is saying, this is the red I'm going to give you. The 2 outer ones, I'm also going to give you this. But how do I know that's the correct red for those patches on Chris's face? Well, one thing I can do is this. If I zoom out, I'll increase the saturation. So everywhere now that has been saturated is where that colour is that Photoshop says, this is what I'm giving you. There's red in the jacket, which was quite surprising. No surprise the rest of his face has got it, because skin has red in, okay? But I want to target just that one area. So what I can do is this. If we zoom in, where we got the markers, let's put that there. If I put my cursor in the middle here, and I move it, I can control what reds I want to have. So I'll go for about there. That looks like it's covering the area on Chris's face. If I turn that before and after, that's covering the area that I want to work on, right? Right, so now that I know that those bars are in the right position, I can take the saturation back to 0. Now, think of the colour wheel. We've got the red face. How can I now reduce or get rid of that reddening in his face there? We've got the colour wheel. We've got red, green and blue, right? Red, green and blue. On the other side of that, the opposite colour, cyan, magenta, yellow, and obviously then black. So if I want to get rid of the red in Chris's face, add cyan. All right, so now that I know that my markers are in the right points, I'll get my hue slider, if you keep an eye on the face here, and I'm going to add in some cyan. Around about there, let's say, that's going to go. So before, and after. So you can see just by moving those, we're able to target that particular area without making selections and getting all stressed out. All right, so even though it's considered a basic way of using Photoshop with hue and saturation, there are some pretty cool things we can do with it if we just dive into it a little bit more, right? Quite useful. All right then, now we're going to start building up, all right? So all these little things here, remember these little things. Okay, right, now let's go a little bit deeper. I'm going to open up this tree here. And we'll double click there. Okay, so I just want to cut the tree out from the background. Like I say, we're going to build up. Now we've got a lot more stuff to think about. Little leaves, little branches, little twigs that we want to kind of pick up on. Think of that also. That could be hair. Again, not a busy background, but we're going to build up. That could be hair, but lots of detail. So how can I now cut that out? Well, let's look at 2 ways we can do it. Because in our toolbox, we've got lots of different tools we can use to our advantage. All right, so what I'm going to do then, first of all, we've used this one already. We could go select and color range. And you can see here, if I just click around again, we know what we're going to select by where we click. Underneath that, Photoshop is saying that's what you want. We can come over to the plus color sample here, and we can drag across. And then we can use that weird slider, the fuzziness slider, to bring more color in, something like that. You can see if I go too far, we're starting to bring too much in. So I'll just back it off just about there and click OK. And when we do that, Photoshop goes crazy, right? Absolutely crazy. You can see it's selecting all these areas here. Now to cut this out, what I'm not going to do is just drag it off onto a new document, because that's destructive. If I've missed bits, I've got to do it all again. So I'm going to use a layer mask. So I'm just going to click here to get the layer mask like so. Now, here's the thing. Look at the layer mask itself over here. I actually want to have the grass in this, but can you see how not all the grass has been selected? Can you see how in the top right-hand corner it's a bit grey? So that still would be in the selection. So I need to tidy that up. I've got to tidy up this, because on a layer mask, when we're making selections, what is white is what we can see. What is black is what we can't see, right? So how can I tidy this up? Well, what I used to do was this. I used to just get a brush, a normal soft edge round brush, black foreground colour, and I would come in and I'd start to paint it away, like up here, get rid of that grey and what have you. But the trouble was, when I got down to here, it would go over it. And that's a bit of a nightmare, all right? So what do? Well, what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to use my black brush, but when we use a tool in Photoshop, at the top of the screen there, we've got the options bar. And those options are unique to that tool that you're using. And I'm going to change the blend mode here from normal to overlay. So now what this means is, if I paint in black or if I paint in white, the brush is only going to cover over grey areas. It's only going to cover anything that isn't pure black or pure white. I'll show you what I mean. So let's say now that I want to get rid of this grey area over here and make the black area look good. I've got a black foreground colour, overlay blend mode. I'm going to make my brush really big and I'm just going to paint across. Do you see how it's not affecting the actual tree and the grass there? That's pretty cool. Now then, let's change over to white foreground colour. I can make the tree more dense, look at that. And I can cover over the grass as well. Now these areas down here, they're not right on the edge, so I can just change back to the normal blend mode and just very quickly cover those up. Like so. So now when we go back, we can see we've got a decent cutout. All right, so that's one way there. That overlay blend mode was a complete lifesaver because I would be so careful trying to paint around things, not to spill over, but overlay blend mode, massive change. Let me show you another way. Let's just revert this back to normal, like so. Another way we could cut it out, if that didn't work for you, is using something called the blend if sliders. And this is brilliant. This is absolutely brilliant. What I'll do first of all is I'm going to add a layer above. Let's just go layer, new fill layer, and solid color. I'm only doing this so that you can see I've cut it out, all right? And we'll choose, let's choose a sky kind of color, something like that, and click OK. And I'm going to drag that underneath. So here's what else we could do, super fast. To the right-hand side of the layer's name just here, if I double-click, it'll bring up the layer style dialog box. We can also access it from the bottom of the layers panel. Now, if you look in the middle of this, here we've got the blend if sliders. Let's make this a little bit bigger over here. Let's push it there. We've got grey, red, green, and blue. Now, the sky is predominantly blue, right? So let's choose blue. And I can now take this slider at the top here, this layer. The far right-hand corner is saying that this is blue. If I drag it over to the left-hand side, you'll see it gets darker. So that would kind of hide the blue. So let's have a look what it does. I'll take that marker and I'll drag it. And you can see that it actually gets rid of it like so. So now we can see that layer beneath. If I zoom in, it's not that nice around the edges just there. It's a little bit crispy, which we don't like. So what I can do now is hold down the Alt key or the Option key, depending if you're on Mac or Windows. And we can split this slider just here to feather it off just a touch. Just to soften it down just a little bit. So that's looking all right just there. And then we'll click OK. Let's just double click the hand. So it kind of looks good. But how good is it really? Because look at this. If you look at the layers panel, can you notice the thing that's different between this one now is the fact that we can still see the sky in that thumbnail. So it is still there. So how good is my cutout really? Let's have a look. Let's just say that I wanted to darken the tree down, almost make it like a silhouette. I could go and get, let's say, a levels adjustment. And I'm going to use this little icon at the bottom here. That's called a clipping mask. So that what I do now on this level only affects the layer directly below. We'll click on that. And then I'll darken the tree down like this. But can you see now what's happening? I am now starting to see that layer at the very beginning here, the original sky. So that layer masking isn't very good using the blend if. So how can we fix it? Let's get rid of the actual levels adjustment there. Now this little trick here was a friend of mine called Jesus Ramirez. He runs the Photoshop training channel, super guy. Now if you look at this layer, if I convert this layer to a smart object, watch what happens to the thumbnail. So I'll go to this, let's go up here, go layer, smart object, convert to smart object. Look what happens to the thumbnail. Can you see now we've got transparent pixels there? So we can use the blend if to get rid of the color. Now I can check that layer mask. Because if I hold down my control key now and click on the thumbnail, it loads it up as a selection like we would expect to see. And if I add a layer mask to it, we can see now we've got the cutout, but how good is it? Hold down the Option key or the Alt key, click on the thumbnail, not very good at all. So how can we tidy it up? We use the brush, we'll use a black foreground color, we'll use the overlay blend mode, make the brush really big to save time, and we'll just brush over it. Really quick. Make sure the tree's nice and dense, make sure the ground's nice and dense, and go back. So now we've got our cutout, all right? So that's just a couple of ways there that you can probably find that sometimes you have, little problems, you can't tidy your layer masking up. Just doing those kind of things can maybe help you, all right? Don't worry about taking it all in if you don't get it. There's the video and the assets, all right? Cool. Right, let me show you one other thing before we get into the hair. All right, let's have a look here. So this one is a picture here again of my mate Dave, just here. It doesn't actually look like that. I did change it so he looked like that. But he wanted to be photographed like the chap on Up. I think his name was Carl on Up. Photographed him in the studio. If I just open that picture here. Where are we? So we've got fringing here, this one here. This is the original. Well, I say the original, it doesn't actually look like that anyway. I've kind of manipulated it a little bit in Photoshop, but that's Dave. So quite an easy cutout. Contrast between Dave and the background is massive, so it should be easy to cut him out, okay? This is the kind of thing that gets shown in a tutorial. How hard could this be? But let's have a look. Well, I've done my quick selection around him, and I've worked on the hair. I'm not going to show you that because that is easy, right? Quick selection tool. But here's a problem you might encounter. Let me just get the selection. And we can see the marching ants going around Dave. And I'll add a layer mask. Let's put a color beneath him to see how good it is. And I'll put, let's put black just there now. Can you see the problem? That a really annoying fringe that you get when you're doing cutouts. You can spend ages doing cutouts, and then you get that. And it's like, ah. And what I used to do when I had this, I'd get a brush, really small brush in black, and I'd paint all the way around him to try and get rid of it. Anybody else done that? Yeah, that's horrible, isn't it? Horrible. But let's just show you a quicker way of doing it, a really quick way of getting rid of that fringing. Now, all you've got to remember is the cutout on the body is pretty good, and I've worked on the hair. We can see his hair. Let's just zoom down a little bit. His hair's fine. Cartoon character hair, that's absolutely fine. So here's how we're going to get rid of the fringing on the body. Not on the hair, on the body. Let's just zoom out a little bit. Like so. All right. Now, make note of this. I'm going to click on the layer mask. You've got to be active on the layer mask when you're doing this. All right? So, thinking back to the start when we did the teeth, and we said to Photoshop, only think about this area here within this selection. I'm now going to get my lasso tool, and I'm on the layer mask, and I'm going to draw out a rough selection all around Dave, except for the hair. So Photoshop now is only concentrating on Dave, not his hair, all right? Now that I've done that, and this is really important to do this next step, I'm going to go to the filter menu, go to blur, and then Gaussian blur. And I'm only going to add in 1 pixel radius of blur. That's all it needs to be. And then I'll click OK. Now that might seem so insignificant, but it makes a huge difference. It's the small things in Photoshop and retouching that make the big difference, right? The next step, we're going to get rid of the fringing around Dave. If I hadn't done that blur, when I get rid of that fringing, the outline of Dave would be razor sharp. It would be so obvious that it's a cutout. I know it's a cartoon, but you get the idea. But it's so obvious. When I look at you folks in the audience, you haven't got razor edges to you. You kind of blend into the scene, don't you? And that's what we want here. That's why you do that 1 pixel radius of blur. Now, keep the selection active. This is the next step we're going to do. This now gets rid of it. And I'm going to zoom in to an appropriate area. We'll go to here. All right. So we've got all the fringe in there. Now I'm going to get an adjustment. I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, and Levels. Now notice I didn't get an adjustment layer. I'm getting an adjustment that's working directly on that layer mask. Okay? So, now that we've got that, here we've got our histogram, if you like. We've got the blacks, the greys, the whites, or the highlights. And all I'm going to do now is get the blacks marker here, and as I move this, watch the halo. So we click on it, and I start to drag it over to the right. A little bit more, a little bit more. And eventually, gone. I missed a bit on the original selection there, but can you see the difference already? So let's go back. There's the fringe. Let's drag it over. Keep watching, keep watching, keep watching, and eventually it goes like so. See, that's gone just there. Then we can click OK, and we'll just do that there and deselect it. So what's actually happened there? The layer mask contains black and it contains white. The white areas we can see. That's Dave. The black areas we can't. So when I get my levels adjustment and I get my blacks and I drag it across, I'm making the layer mask have more black. So what's happening is that black area around Dave is growing. And as it grows, it covers over his outline. So it creeps over that fringe. So you can no longer see it. That's all that's happening. So just using a slider, we can get rid of it. Now you might say, well, there's other ways we can do that with 1 click in Photoshop. And you're right, there are. But the problem with that is 1 click might be too much. It might not be enough. With this, we can control it exactly how much we want. And also, I can control where I want it by using that selection. So we can just use it nice and simple and job done. Easy? That's useful stuff, right? That's kind of useful stuff. Cool. All right. So, will you just get to the hair, Glyn? Let's just get to the hair. All right. So, let's have some water. Are you with me so far? Cool. All right. So, I'm going to show you how to cut out this hair. If the background's not that difficult, but then after that, I'm going to show you ways you can fake it if you get a busy background. So let's just open this file up, and we'll go to this one. All right. Now, total disclosure here, this is a picture I took about 8 years ago, and I never did anything with it because I couldn't cut her out. Seriously, I just could not cut her out. I really struggled with the hair, really badly. My style of photography, what I do now, has changed completely, so I'm never going to do anything with it. But it's just good to know that now my time 8 years ago wasn't wasted, because here I am in LA using the picture for you. So that's kind of useful, all right? So I am making use of my time. All right, so my workflow, and take from that what you will, this is how I would approach this. We've got 2 very distinct, different areas to work on here, I think. We've got the hair, and we've got the body. Now the body, look at the contrast between the body and the background. It's massive, right? Easy. Photoshop will have no problem with that whatsoever. The hair, different story. There's lots of stuff going on there. Now, what I found when I used to do it the old way, I'd make a selection of it all and then try to sort out the hair. But when I use things like Refine Edge or Select and Mask, if I tried to make the hair better, it would then affect the selection on the body. So the 2 were competing against each other. So now what I do is I make 2 selections because it saves me time and heartache, all right? So here's what I'm going to do. And again, this is my workflow, but it might be useful. So the first thing I'm going to do is this. I'm going to get my quick selection tool. Let's just zoom out a little bit. And I'm going to make a selection of the body. So we'll just drag it around the body like so. And you can see Photoshop finds that really, really easy. No surprises there. That should be easy. And I'll bring it up to something like that. So I don't want to get the hair at this stage. Let's have a look down here. We can see there's a little bit in here I've missed, so I need to get rid of it. And what sometimes I would do is this. I'd hold down my Alt key, and I'd try to get in the small gaps, and I'd try to get it to work, and I'd spend ages trying to get the damn thing to work. But it was a nightmare. I'm thinking, what am I doing? Why don't I just come out of that for a second, and then use something basic, which is really handy, which is Quick Mask. If I press Q on the keyboard, I can see the selection I've made because it's covered in that red overlay. And what I can do now, if I zoom in, oops, let's just move that back. If I zoom into here and I get a brush in a normal blend mode, what I can do, rather than trying to struggle to get down that selection and get rid of that area, I'll just come in and paint it away quickly, change to the opposite colour, and then paint it in. Like so. Much quicker than me trying to do that thing, holding down the Alt key, thinking, come on, you shouldn't be selecting this. Just doing that is really simple, really quick and easy, all right? Okay, so now that I've got that selection, I will go to the Select menu, and I'll choose Save Selection. And I'll call this one Body. And then just click OK. So that now is safe. If I mess up later on, it's not a problem. All that work I've just done is there and it's safe. As long as I save this file as a PSD, a Photoshop file, or a TIFF file, I've got that. If I save as a JPEG, it goes. All right, so Photoshop file, TIFF, that will keep that there. So let's just deselect. I don't need that now. There we go. That's nice and safe, and you can see it just here. Look, body. So now then, let's do the hair. All right, let's just bring the flow up on there, and I'm going to get my quick selection tool. Now, with all the updates in Photoshop, they would expect you, I guess, to use the latest stuff, because that's what they've been working on. So you might think now, I'm going to dive into Select and Mask, and we'll start cutting the hair out. I don't like to do that, and I'll just show you why. If I click on Select and Mask, I'll choose the onion skin view, which I quite like, and I'm going to use my quick selection tool here. As I drag around the hair, can you see there's a bit of a lag? It's quite slow. I find that's kind of very hard work and intensive on my computer. So I don't tend to do that. It's your choice if you want to, but I don't. What I'll tend to do is this. I'll get my quick selection tool, and I'll select the hair, first of all, here. See how quick that is there? I just find it better doing it that particular way for me. Now, here's the trick. When you make that selection of the hair, you do not want to have any of the background showing through the hair. So you can see over on here, we can see the background between the hair, can't we? We do not want that. So while I've got the quick selection tool, I'm going to hold down the Alt key or Option key, depending on Mac or Windows, and I'm just going to remove the selection where I can see the hair and the background. I don't want that at all. And I'll just take my time going around, getting rid of anywhere I can see the background coming through the hair. Like this, a little bit up top. A little bit on this left-hand side as well. Let's just take that off. And down here as well, something like that. And obviously we don't want to include this area here, so I'll make my brush a little bit smaller, and we'll just get rid of that in there. And I'll just add that in just like that. I can't use the actual quick mask there because there's hair and stuff. That's just too detailed for me to use that. All right, Now that I've got that, in fact, there's a little bit here. Let's just get rid of that. Okay. Now that I've done that, now I go into select and mask. Show of hands, who used to use and loved Refine Edge? That little dial, wasn't that good? I loved that. Who here wishes we still had it? Only between us. Who? Yeah, I still wish we still had it. Because it was just quick and easy and it worked. I love it. If you want it back, you don't have to go and uninstall and get an older version. All right? Here's a workaround just between us. All right? When you want to go to select and mask, or you want Refine Edge rather, go to the select menu. Here's select and mask. If you hold down your shift key, then click on it, Refine Edge. Yes. So it's there, all right? But that's just between us, all right? Don't tell them that you're using it. So that's there if you prefer it. I like that. But obviously we're moving on now. Select and mask. There's a lot of stuff in there. It's just a bit more intensive on your computer. All right, so I will go now and use select and mask. And I'll show you how I now use it. We've got the transparency. I like to go to the onion skin here, because there I can either go to a 100% where I can see nothing, or I can bring it down a little bit so I can still see a little bit of my subject. It's not quite so visible as the area I've already selected. What I'll do now is I'll use the Refine Edge brush. And what I find with this that works better, some people will tell you, make it nice and big and just go round. I don't think that works quite as well. I make it a little bit smaller and I actually go over the hair rather than just going like that, because I think that causes a few issues. So what I'll do is this. Refine Edge, and I'll just make it a little bit bigger using the left and right bracket keys, like that. That's the left one makes it smaller, right one makes it bigger, and I'll paint over the hair, like this. I try not to go over too much the hair I've already selected. So we can see it's starting to pick it up. Like so, and the great thing is you'll notice, can you see already that it's not bringing in all that grey background, which we omitted. We said don't want that. So now it's just looking for all the hairs that aren't the background, which is great. All right, so we'll go for that there. All right, that's looking all right. We can check how our layer mask is looking by increasing this transparency here. That's not looking too bad, but look at that. Horrible. All this here, that's horrible, isn't it? This is when you get frustrated and you think, can't be bothered. I can't get it to work. But what have we covered already? There's little things we've done already. We can go to our black and white view here. We can get a brush here in the select and mask. And I can actually brush in this area. So let me just brush it. I'm not using the quick selection tool. I'm just using the brush. Like so. Now the only danger with this, and this is where I really would like you folks to go onto the Adobe website at some point and make a suggestion of what you'd like to see in Photoshop. And that is that you would like to see the brush in select and mask have the overlay blend mode option. Because at the moment, it's just a brush. So if I paint up here, it goes over. That's not as good as using the overlay blend mode. So make a suggestion. Imagine if we had a little tick box now that said overlay. That'd be brilliant. So maybe that could be something for the future. But we'll take it to there, something like that. That's kind of okay. And we'll go back to the onion skin view. Now we can then start to play around with some of these settings here. Smart radius. And bring up the radius. But you've got to be so careful now, because if you bring that up too much, you're going to bring some of that background in again. All the stuff you don't want. So here's what we're going to do. At the bottom, we should have music, shouldn't we? Just to annoy them. Right, okay. All right, so at the bottom here, it says output to. I'm going to choose layer mask. That is your safety net. You'll always use layer masks. So go for layer mask and click OK. So what can we do now to help this tidy it all up? Well, I could come in and use that blend mode. We'll change it from normal to overlay. But if I did this now, I wouldn't paint at 100%. I would lower the flow down just a little bit. So when I paint on the mask, it's just gentle, as opposed to just going for it, all right? So let's have a look here. Very gently, just brushing it in. Oh, bring that flow down just a touch. Let's just go back a little bit there. So nice and gentle, like so. All right, okay. Tell you what, let's put a layer below this now. We'll go layer, new fill layer, solid color, just so we can see what we're doing. And click that, and we'll put it underneath. And we'll choose this color, and we'll drag it down. Make a nice darker one, right? Let's go for something like that, and click OK. Right, now, this is what I'm guessing you've all had. Look at that. Horrible. That looks terrible, doesn't it? And no matter how many times now you go back into selected mask and you try to get it, it's like, why can't I do this? You're not alone. We all experience this. Now we're going to fake it. All right, this is when it's okay to fake it. Right, there's a photographer who's here this week, a guy called Joel Grimes. I don't know if you know Joel, but he's a superb guy. And he has a saying when he's doing his composites of sell the fake. That's all he's doing. He's selling the fake. You know what you've done. Does your client? Does it matter? They think it looks great. Doesn't matter, does it? Have we got every hair? Who cares? It looks good. All right? Don't get hung up about everything. But here's what we can do. This is a bit of a trick. All right, so now watch this. Let's just zoom out a touch. We've got all this horrible stuff here we need to pick up on. I'm going to add a new layer. All right, add a new layer. Now I'm then going to use a clipping mask. So I hold down my Alt key or my Option key, depending on Mac or Windows, and I put my cursor in between the top layer and the layer of my model. And we can see now it changes to that little icon. When I click down, look how that layer moves across. That's telling you now you've got what's called a clipping mask. And I apologize if those of you who know this, bear with me. The clipping mask. So now what's going to happen is this. We're going to try to fix that horrible hair. And I'm going to put the fix on that layer above. But I only want the fix to be visible on the hair, don't I? I don't want the fix and what I do to be all over the background as well. So I need to restrict where the fix is going to go. That's why I'm using a clipping mask. Anything now that I do on that top layer will only be visible on the bits you can see of the layer below. And that's her with her hair, right? The layer underneath has got a layer mask on it that's got a white bit on it. The only bit you can see is her hair. So anything I do on this layer above is only going to be visible on that. All right, you with me? You get the video, you get the assets. Cool. Right. All right. All right. Remember, you would slow this down by about 800% if you're doing this. So what can we do now? Let's just make that a little bit bigger. All right, I'm going to get, believe it or not, I'm going to get my clone stamp tool. Bizarre. Clone stamp tool. Now, you remember I said when you choose a tool in Photoshop at the top of the screen, whenever you choose a tool, you get unique options for that particular tool. So here, we've got the clone stamp tool. We're going to change the blend mode to darken. So the blend mode of the clone stamp tool goes to darken. So what I'm going to do now, and you'll follow me on this one, I'm going to sample her hair with the clone stamp tool. And I'm then going to apply that onto the bits that are looking horrible. Those bits that look horrible are lighter, aren't they? They're really bright and light. So I only want to darken those down. So by me using the blend mode darken, wherever I sample on her hair to use, it's only going to darken the areas that are brighter than it. All right? So let's have a look how that works. So we've got all this horrible stuff going around here, but that's hair. We want that. I'm going to choose this area here, for example, to start off with. Hold down my Alt key or my Option key just to sample some of that hair into Photoshop's brain. In fact, let's just put, yeah. All right, so now that I've sampled it, and you can see it there, I'm going to brush over that hair. Sample, I'll move around, sample over there, brush it in. Sample over there, brush it in. So I'm just making a load of different samples going around and cloning those samples onto those bits we can just about see. All right, so let's have a look at that. Again, just slow this down when you're doing it, but you make multiple selections, or multiple samples rather, with that clone stamp tool to try and make it look as good as you can, like so. That area here, that bit of hair, we could come in with a normal brush on the layer mask. Let's have a look at that. Normal brush, white brush, normal blend mode. Let's just try and bring that down just a touch. Something like that. And something like that. All right, so what have we done? Let's go to here. We can lower the opacity of that if you wanted to. But just that there is helping us to pick up some of that hair. All right? Again, we are selling the fake. Do not expect Photoshop, no matter how good it gets, to pick up everything. We're all going to experience challenges, but we need to learn techniques that can help us to overcome those challenges, right? But this one here, for me, has been just a lifesaver when it comes to faking the look of selecting lots of hairs, all right? So does that make sense? Again, you got the video, you got the assets, but all we're doing is sampling the hair and darkening down all those horrible bits which Refine Edge yet can't kind of work for us, all right? So that's one little technique there. Now, what else am I going to do? We've got the hair looking kind of how I want it, like so. Now then, we need to finish off this selection. Oh, in fact, I didn't go into there, did I? Let's just click on the layer mask, and we'll go back into select and mask, and I'll just get my, there, and we'll just brush that in, just to pick that up just a touch. No, that looks awful. Let's just go back. Let's just come into here, pick that up like so, and we'll click OK, bring that out, and there we go. All right, so that's that just there. Now, we made the selection of the body, right? We're on the layer mask. Let's now go to the select menu, load selection, the one that we saved ages ago, to keep it nice and simple by separating what we're doing. The channel here, the one we called body, you'll find. Click on body, and then OK. And it loads it now as a selection. For us to see the body, we're on the layer mask. The white areas are what we can see. So let's just fill that now. Edit, fill, and we'll choose white. And click OK. And then deselect. So now we're getting our cutout. We're able to work on the hair without affecting the body. Now what I did to, or what I would have done 8 years ago to finish this off would have been something like this. I'd have got my marquee tool, my elliptical marquee tool, another selection tool there, dragged out an ellipse like this. Let's just move that across just a touch. Gone to a levels adjustment, and I'd have brightened it up a little bit, and then feathered that quite a bit, like so. And we can actually make that a little bit bigger as well. Let's go for there, and bring that down as well, something like that. So that's the kind of thing I would have done with this. In fact, the color, let's make the color better. Let's duplicate that color we used for the background, and we'll put that at the top and change the blend mode to color, and then lower it down a bit, like so. That just takes the edge off it just a touch. That's what I would have done had I known how to do that 8 years ago. All right? But that's a fix for the hair. With me so far? Right, now let me show you a real cheat. All right? Now watch this. This I learned from an artist, a guy who I really would love you to check out, because it's amazing how much as graphic designers, illustrators, photographers, we can learn from what I would call a traditional artist. a guy called Aaron Blaze. He's a friend of mine. He worked at Disney for 21 years. He's got a website called creatureartteacher.com. Fabulous stuff. Now, I've learned loads from Aaron because being an artist, he understands how to composition, light, shadow, but also hair and fur. Let me show you a couple of pictures he's done. And we'll go to here and here. So this one here, this is a drawing he's done of my cats, okay, at home. Love them to bits, all right? But look at the hair, look at the fur. How good is that? It's almost kind of like you could touch it, right? This is just drawing. So you've got that there. We've also got this one here that he's done. So artists, so much we can learn from people who are brilliant at doing this kind of stuff. And I want to show you a technique I've learned from Aaron, which again has saved me massive. Let's just close those down. And I'm going to show you what would consider to be a hard cutout. And we'll go for, here we go. All right, so I used to do a series of pictures where I was going to zoos and wildlife parks and photographing animals, cutting them out and then creating new scenes so it looked like I'd set them free. I've never been to Africa, I've never been on a safari. This was my cheap way of doing it, and it felt good, all right? Example being this one just here, just there. That kind of thing I would do just to try and, make myself feel good, like I was helping the world, that kind of thing. But cutting out, somebody replied to me, that email I sent out, somebody sent an email saying, could you show us how to do a cutout when it's really low contrast between the foreground that you want to cut out and the background, or it's not very sharp? How on earth can we do that? This is a perfect example. I've done the cutout already, I'll show you there, but look, if we zoom in, whoops, not the best place, but you get the idea. So you can see how it's not particularly sharp, it's not very high detail, but I've done a cutout, which is that one just there. So not bad, all right? But let me show you a trick, how you can do this really quickly, all right? Let's just duplicate this. We'll go to Image and Duplicate. And then what we'll do is we'll get rid of that top bit, and we'll get rid of this layer mask. And I've already made a very quick selection, nothing else, just use the quick selection tool to go around the fawn, the little baby deer. When I did it, it initially went on to this other one, so I used quick mask and painted it off that deer, all right? Using the basic stuff. So let me just load that one up. All right, and then we're going to use a layer mask to cut it out. But when we zoom in, look how bad it is. That's not good at all, right? That just looks awful. So then what I did originally was I went to Select and Mask. And I thought, I know how to sort this out. Let's just bring this up here. Whoops. Let's just go to here. I get my Refine Edge brush, and I brush over the top. All right, that's okay. But then when I come down here, awful. Just looks absolutely awful. So how can I fix that? Let's cancel that for a second. All right. This is what we're going to do. Step one, get a brush with a black foreground color. And choose a brush that is round and completely hard. So 100% hardness. Now, for time, just so you know, I went all the way around the deer when I did this for the final picture. I'll show you what I did just on this one part on his backside, or her backside, just here, all right? With this black, round, hard brush, all I'm going to do is, whoops, let's take that to 100%, is paint away the deer. So we'll work on that bit there, right? Which is kind of weird thing to do, first of all. So now what am I going to do? Let's go and look at brushes. These are your lifesaver. When you're doing selections and cutouts, these are your lifesaver. And in fact, I would say in the commercial world, these are probably used more than traditional selection and cutout tools, brushes, all right? Let's just show you what I mean by using a brush. Let's just create a new document just here. Now in your brushes, if you've got the latest versions of Photoshop, the brushes panel took up a new, they kind of updated it. So it's really kind of been revamped and kind of they've reorganized how the brushes are. So you might find you can't find your old brushes. So what I need you to do is go to your brushes and load in the legacy brushes. They're the ones that used to be in Photoshop until they updated it, not recently, but the time before. And in these legacy brushes, you can see here, it says legacy brushes, default brushes. Now there's two in particular here, 112 and 134. Let me click on 134. Now when I first of all use that brush, this is what it's going to give me. That. This was made by Bert Monroy and designed to look like grass. All right? But we can do stuff with that. So let's just get rid of that. Let's go now to the brush settings. This is where you can have fun. If you've ever been scared of brushes before, don't be. Just get in there and play. You can't break it. They're great fun. At the bottom here, we've got a preview of what that brush looks like. It looks like grass. But let's turn off all the settings. So we're left with that. So what does that look like at the moment? It just looks like that. So now, let's go to Shape Dynamics. Size Jitter, it's at 100%. That basically means whenever I use the brush, lift off, press down, or use a tablet and push harder, it varies the size of the brush head. But I want to make this look like fur on that baby deer. So that needs to be quite proportionate because it's the same kind of size, right? So let's bring down the size jitter. The angle jitter, if I wanted to make dust and snow and all that, I'd probably really crank that up. But I don't want the angle to be too different here. So I'm going to bring this way down, like so. Then I'm going to go back to the brush tip shape. And look what happens in the preview here as I change the spacing. Now it's starting to look like fur a little bit. And this is what it's giving me. Okay? So what can I do with that now? Let's go back to the deer that I'm trying desperately to cut out. Originally, I used a black brush to hide the deer. Now let's use a white brush to bring the deer back, but in the shape of the brush. So I change it to white. Bring the size down. Let's just zoom in a little bit. Whoops. And I'll start painting back. Like this. All right. Now, the problem here is you could paint too high and you could start bringing in some of that background, right? So how can we stop that? Well, we're using a layer mask. If I click on the layer mask and get the properties, we have the density slider. This is like the onion skinning in Select and Mask. If I bring that down, I can start to see the outline of the deer. So now I know where to brush. And I'll come in like this. Now, look what the problem now is. All these little things we've got to think about. My brush at the moment is only going, there's the top and there's the bottom. So no matter how I use that, it's always going to be the top bit like this, all right? If I show you on the brush over here, look, if I use the brush on here, if I go across, but then I go down, see how it's still the same direction? How can I take it to the next level? Here we are again, the next level. Well, here's what I'm going to do. I go to my brush settings, shape dynamics, and here we've got angle jitter, control. Go down to the bottom of the control menu and you've got direction. If I click on that, now watch. It follows the direction of the brush. Really handy, all right? Thank you very much, thank you. So now what I need to do is with the brush, just start painting down. So you can imagine now I would take my time, slowing down at 800%, just to get it right, take my time. So let's have a look at that there. And we'll go to there, something like that. Now let's bring back up that density on that layer mask, because you can see over here it's grey, which means it's kind of translucent, we can see through it. Let's just bring up the density to there. But can you see I have actually got a little bit of that green in there. That's still showing through. So how can I fix that? Remember the one with the hair, with the cloning? We're going to do it slightly different. I'm going to add a layer mask. Sorry, I'm going to add a new layer mask. Add a new layer, all right? Then I'm going to do that clipping mask thing. Clip down so that that layer, whatever I do on here, is only visible on the visible parts of the layer below it. Then I get a normal round brush. So let's just go and get a normal round brush. And I'll make it a little bit softer, like so. And what I'm going to do is change the blend mode of this layer here to color, like so. And then all I'm going to do is come in, hold down my Alt key. When I'm using the brush, if I hold down the Alt key, can you see how you get the color sampler? And when I click on that, it samples that color into my foreground color here. And I'll just quickly come in and paint it off those green areas. Like so. So there we go. So just using that layer there, before, after. And then we can do the cutout using, and if you look at the layer mask, that's all we've done. We've brought the deer has been revealed again in the shape of the brush. How much of a time saver is that? And a heartache. Do you know, I only wish about 8 years ago I discovered it. I did have a full head of hair, but I can't now, you know. But the brushes, I recommend you look at Aaron Blaze's website, Creature Art Teacher. He makes brushes for Photoshop. I don't get anything off the back of telling you this, but I've got his brushes. I brought them. He sells packs of brushes, $5 for 20 brushes. There's so much in there. Loads of hair brushes, not just stuff like that, but stuff that looks like your hair and your hair. He's got it all. Let me show you. Let's just cover this layer over here. Let's get the brush, and I'll show you just a couple of them that I've got in here now. Here's some of them here, look. So this brush here. So we've got that kind of hair, all right? We've got this kind of hair. So in the brush settings as well, you can get it to sample 2 colors within the hair you're trying to fill in, and it'll vary between that, so it looks much more natural when you're painting it in. I did a presentation in the Netherlands. They're very liberal-minded in the Netherlands, and I kind of showed them a technique, and I was saying about these brushes, and when I showed them this brush, they found it quite funny. I've no idea why, but they did, all right? But let's just move on, all right? All right, so that's that there. Now, we've got a few minutes left. I want to show you one other little thing that Aaron showed me, because this is all about using techniques, not one technique, but a collection of techniques out of our toolbox that we can put together to kind of get the result we want, right? So there's never just one technique you're going to use. Brilliant, it works. You might have to bring something else in like we're doing here. But let me finish off with one technique. I think we've got time to finish off on this. Didn't show this on Monday, so this is a bonus. 4 classes in one and a bonus, all right? Let's have a look here. So, right, close that one down. And I'll open up this picture. Let's have a look here. I've got a lion that I was cutting out. Not that one, not that one. Lion smudge, there we go. Cool, thank you. So lion smudge. Let's make that a bit bigger. Okay, so when I took this picture, I've removed the kind of like the fencing from on top of the lion. So when I'm taking the picture, I was kind of like through the car window. I put the window down. And I was taking the shot like this, and I showed a tutorial how to get rid of the fencing. And somebody said to me, "Why didn't you just get out and take the picture?" Hello, it's a lion. Do you know what I mean? I get something giving it this behind me as I'm doing the pictures. No chance. So I did my best to get rid of the fencing. Now I've done a cutout. Just here, quick selection tool. I've even tried to use refine edge and select and mask. Let me just put a layer above so you can see what we've got here. So layer, new fill there, solid color. Let's just choose a bluish kind of color for the sky, something like that. And let's just put that beneath. But when I zoom in, look how bad that is. Horrible, okay, horrible. So what can I do? The layer mask, you'll notice that I've already saved it. So this is already nice and safe. So it doesn't matter what I do now. I've already got that there just in case I make a mistake. But I will do, though, not with that brush, definitely not with that brush. We'll use a normal round brush. Let's just get rid of this horrible stuff here. Let's just get rid of it, all right? Now, I'm just going to show you this really quick. What I'm going to do is this. I'm going to, on the layer mask, I'm going to right-click. And here it says Apply Layer Mask. When I click on that, it gives me one single layer, no layer mask, but you can see the result is the transparency around it, right? Doesn't matter about the fact I've done that. It's not destructive because I've still got the original one nice and safe. Then what I'll do is I will create a copy of it. All right, so that's just there. Now, what I'm going to do is smudging. And this is what artists will do to create fur, another way of creating fur. But let me just show you an example of what I mean and how we can create that. Let's just create another new document. And we're going to get, over here we've got this Smudge Tool. So this Smudge, probably never use, you might never use this before, I don't know. Smudge Tool is really, really cool. Now what can it do? Let me just drag out a shape, any old shape, and we'll fill that in. So what does a Smudge Tool do? Let's go to Smudge. So let's have a look. The settings are quite high, but this is what it's doing. See that? And you can control the strength, you can do all sorts of stuff with it. So there's potential there, I think, possible potential there. But when you use the Smudge Tool, you're going to use a brush. So you need to make a brush that can look like hair. So I'll show you how to do that now, all right? Let's just get rid of all that stuff in there. Whoops. And what you need to do is this, get a round brush, a hard-edged round brush. And all I want you to do on the document here is go 1, vary the size, 2, 3, and maybe a smaller one there. All right? Looks weird, right? That's your Smudge Tool. Then we're going to go to Edit, Define Brush Preset, and we'll call it Smudge. And click OK. So that now you can see the preview of the brush just as I move it around just there. That's all I need to do now for my Smudge Tool. Now let's go back to the lion. And I'll do it on the one that's on top here, just to give you an idea of what we can do. Let's bring the size right down. And let's zoom into here, let's say. So this is something that you need to take your time doing, need to practice. But combining this with what we've done already, you'll get some really cracking results. What can I do here? Whoops, not that. We don't want that. We want the Smudge Tool. Smudge Tool, we're using that brush. Let's go to the brush we've just made. That one just there. So the name of it will pop up in a second, hopefully. It's called Smudge, but that's the one we've just made. And now if I make it a tiny bit smaller. Now it's going slow because I think this is all plugged into the HDMI and all that kind of stuff's going on. But can you see what I mean now about how we could do this kind of thing? Vary the size of it, drag out some of the hair, push it around and whatever. Just play around like this. Now, I wouldn't do that on the layer above. But I have here, because once I've done, all I will do is then drag it below. And you can start to blend it in. You see what I mean? It's just another little thing. I've got a video of that on my YouTube channel, so don't worry about it. I'll send you the link to it. But it was something extra. All right? I think you could almost say this was rehearsed. We've got 30 seconds to go. How cool is that? So, before we finish, you have got your... is that coming up? No? Here it is. Right. So your surveys... Please be kind. All right, we've had bonus here, 4 classes in one, and a bonus with the smudge. If you could get those done, I'd really appreciate it, because I love LA. It's great if I'd like to come back, but hey, you never know. But it's your conference. You decide. Don't forget your URL. Get your assets. If you want to be part of my email group, my community, then that'd be brilliant. If you don't, download them, unsubscribe. I really am not bothered about that, but I'll be sending out, you'll get the Adobe website with this on, and I'll send you some small extra videos like the smudge and all that kind of stuff. And the other thing is that was launched, my new book was launched here at Max. We're nearly finished now, aren't we? So it's probably too late to tell you, but it's in the pavilion, if they've still got it there. But from me, thank you very much for coming along, and enjoy the rest of Max. All right?